You know, it's like my great-grandma Steve always used to say, thank God for crackheads. Hey guys, Joe here, and I'm back with a computer pickup. This episode is the beginning of March, and I wanted to show a item that I picked up. And I'm a hunter. I'm always going out looking for stuff. I'm going to take the best possible deals I can, and when I do, it usually pays off big time. This time is no exception. There is a reason why Great-Grandma Steve said that. Well, partially because he was crazy, and the other part's because she was right. I had to go to Wilmington, Delaware today for a delivery for the dealership that I do some drives for. Now, I didn't record it because it was just another Silverado, but I wound up sitting there at that dealership for about an hour because they couldn't find the vehicle, and then we had to wait for a phone call because it had too many miles on it. Well, while I was sitting there, I decided to check out Craigslist in the Wilmington area. I generally never bothered to, and this time I'm glad I did. Now, there's been a guy on Craigslist trying to sell a Z77, a Gigabyte Z77 board for like $100. He originally wanted $200, then he dropped it, and then he dropped it, and now he wanted $90. So I messaged him and said, hey man, would you take 70? Because I can get these on AliExpress for 70 bucks. He's like, well, show me. So I showed him where I can get a Gigabyte UD3H board on AliExpress for 70 bucks. And he's like, well, that one's different from mine, so I want more for mine. I gave up at that point. I already have a BioStar Z75 coming, and I'll do a video on that when it arrives. But I didn't want to wait 39 days because it can take up to 39 days for AliExpress to get your shipment to you. And one thing caught my eye. It was a picture of a computer motherboard. It just said computer parts, didn't go into anything, and I clicked on it. And I'm reading through the specs. And he had listed a GTX 670, a Samsung 840 EVO, and then a motherboard. And on the motherboard was an i5. He put 4590K, and I questioned that at first, but I called him up and I said, hey, do you have this stuff? And he said, yep. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want for this? What do you want for that? What do you want for this? And he gave me the numbers, and I made him an offer based on what he was sounding like and what we were talking about. And I went over to his house. Now, unfortunately, one of the items was not as described, and that is this. This is not a 670, this is a 660. And I don't even believe it's a 660 Ti. I think it's just a regular 660 with the direct CU2 cooler on it. However, these are still actually quite valuable in terms of flipping, as well as just having for an extra graphics card. However, not sure how well it shows on camera. This thing is filthy. All the parts were filthy, and they need to be completely disassembled and cleaned. He also gave me the Samsung Evo 840. It's just 120 gig SSD, but you know, it works. As well as this. He gave me this. This is an MSI Gaming 5 1150 socket motherboard. So for those of you that know your sockets, you know this is Z97. Z97 is the cat's meow when it comes to overclocking, and you want a really good one if you're going to try to overclock a processor. Under this heatsink, which I just threw on because I needed to test these components before I did this video, is an Intel Core i5 4690K, not a 4590K. There's such a thing as a 4590T and a 4590S, but those are completely different. For those of you that know your processors, the 4690 is a refresh of the 4670. It's the best that you could have gotten on the 1150 socket for an i5 at the time. It's a 4th generation processor, codenamed Devil's Canyon. The Haswell, which preceded it, was a little bit worse at overclocking because it didn't have really good thermal interface material, TIM, underneath the heat spreader. The 4690 and the i7 version, the 4790K, both have much better thermal interface material, so they can overclock and run at higher clock speeds. This one is the best i5 you could get until you go to a 5th generation processor. The motherboard is really decent. Again, it's a Gaming 5, it supports 3-way SLI, it has an M.2 slot, which eventually I will populate. It uses a 8-pin power up here, where my finger's pointing. Can you see that? Yeah, okay. And it also is really good. It's got a lot of VRMs and power phase delivery. So this board has just about everything you'd want. It's got the killer E2200 sound, it's Sound Blaster Cinema 2, blah, 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 Crossfire and SLI compatible. And it's called the MSI Military Class. So this is as good of a board as you're going to get for an 1150, especially out of MSI, which many of you know I'm not a huge MSI fan, but I've come around a little bit. But going back to the subject at hand, he gave me the processor, the motherboard, the hard drive, the 660, and I'll have to get some video of it tomorrow, a Corsair 600D case. No power supply, just the case. But he gave it to me all for $140. I'm gonna just let that sink in for a second. This is the reason why I say that. I don't know how well you can see. These are sold listings. Today, $150, $135 2 days ago, $152 3 days ago, $150, $150, $150, $130. So the processor by itself is worth what I paid for everything. And then you add to that the fact that the motherboards are anywhere from $120 to $150 as well. The one for $70, let's see, pre-owned parts only, it didn't work. So $120 to $150 just for the motherboard. So worst case scenario, I can get $250 for the processor and the motherboard that I have sitting right here. Samsung Evo 840 is basically worthless, so I'm just gonna use that as an extra drive. It's not worthless, but it's only 120 gig. And the GTX 660, believe it or not, is going on eBay right now for almost 60 bucks. So I could double my money without even breaking a sweat. It's probably what's gonna happen because I don't need this because I have my other i5 and I'm just gonna sell that. Unless I sell that and all the accompanying parts that I have with it, because I could sell that processor and the motherboard and a few other parts I have, including this 660, which I don't want. I wanted a 670. He said it was a 670, and I could flip that and get all my money back and have this for free. So this is one of those things that's going to wait until I get the Z97 board from Ollie, and if that one's any good, then I'll keep that one. If it's not, then I'll sell that one and keep this one. So the point of the video is you need to make deals. You need to watch out. You need to look at the ads that seem a little bit odd, because this guy lived in a really crappy house in a really crappy neighborhood and he really needed money. The fact that he did meant I got a better deal. Now, I wasn't trying to be rude with the kid. I actually made him a fair offer, but when I get there and the graphics card is wrong, then you know what? I'm not gonna take that. So we made that big deal. So he threw in the SSD in the case and took money off of the entire package because he knew that I could just walk away. Now, I am going to test that 4690K with some overclocking. I already know that it works because I hooked it up, but I want to see what it can do in terms of overclocks. If it overclocks well enough, then it will just be my main system. Why bother spending $1,000 to build another X99 system if I don't have to? But I still may sell it. And that's kind of the point, you know? I don't have to, but I should. So it occurred to me that I didn't film a conclusion part of this video because I started putting this computer together on the 1st of the month. It's now the 13th, which is 2 weeks. Let me go over what I did to get to where we are. And what I did was I took a lot of the components I wasn't going to keep, as well as components from the previous computer, and flipped them to make my money back. As you recall, the computer itself was $140 for the motherboard, CPU, GPU, case, and the hard drive. Well, since then, or the SSD. Since then, I've sold the SSD for $33, the GTX 660 for $50, and I got $56 for the i5-3470, which was on the Dell board, which is sitting over there. All told, that got me back 139 of the 140 USD. I got to keep the case, which the AMD Opteron is on, as well as the motherboard, CPU. That's all I really wanted anyway, so I'm very happy. I'm more happy because, honestly, I'm selling this whole system. I only put it together to make sure it worked well and so that I could get good pictures and flip the whole damn thing, because I don't do this just for fun. I do it because it's fun, but I also do it for a living. And if I can turn around and sell these components for, let's face it, I'll probably get about $450 for the system, just the graphics card, motherboard, and the CPU, I'll be happy, because that means I can go and find another system to work on, another system to build, and I don't get stuck with a computer that's just going to collect dust and a wallet that has cobwebs in it. I do have a few components that I've kept from other systems I've built, but in general, everything on this computer is completely replaceable. The CPU is nothing special, the graphics card is nothing special, nothing on here is something I need to keep. If that was a Mars 790 card, yeah, I'd keep it. If the CPU was an engineering sample, I'd probably keep it. But since they aren't, I'm not going to. Having a hobby is fine, but having a hobby that costs too much money is where you wind up with a problem. So in conclusion, I guess the point of the entire video was, if you're savvy enough, you can find these deals. And this is basically what I do all the time. And I mean that. I'm not saying that to be funny, facetious, or an a-hole. It's just, it's not hard for me. It may be difficult for some people, but for me, it's easy. I can throw a dead cat out my window and wind up with a double dissipation 280 or a GTX 760 superclock. The other reason I like to focus on the mid-range stuff to lower end stuff is because, believe it or not, you make more money doing that. A GTX 760, for example, if you pick it up cheap enough, you can actually double your money on it. I paid $60, I already sold it for $120 online. It's just the way the market goes. So if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave me a message. Anything you want to do that down below. And if you have any questions about how I do what I do, I'd be happy to answer them. Maybe even make a video if you guys want to send me some questions, and I'll answer them in like a Q&A video. Don't forget to subscribe. Click up there if you'd like to become a Patreon or just throw something in the tip jar. And click over here if you'd like to watch another video. And as always, I'll talk to you later.